Hey, it's Coach Taylor from SmarterTeamTraining.com. I am pretty pumped to talk a little bit of baseball with one of the guys from the Toronto Blue Jays. His name's Chris Joyner. I'll tell you how this worked. I sent an email out to him over a year ago at this point, and I said, hey, would you mind just talking about what has worked for you, and what do you kind of know now that you wish you knew when you got involved in the field and that type of thing, and going back and forth over time, we finally got a chance to collaborate or coordinate our schedules, I should say, and get on the phone. And so, Chris, man, it's just honestly a privilege and an honor to get a chance to talk to you. For all the listeners, we've never met in person. I don't think we've ever met at a clinic or an event. It's just two professionals for the first time. We literally got on the phone maybe 5 minutes ago, just talking shop about the field and talking about some topics that hopefully can help and make a positive impact on the kids that we get a chance to work with. So, Chris, man, I'm just excited to have you on the phone, buddy.
Yeah, Rob, thanks a lot. Like I told you earlier, it's been long overdue, and I appreciate you making the time for me to kind of share what we have going on over here.
Chris, before we get started, man, can you do me a favor? I enjoy asking everybody about their passion and how they got involved in the field, what gets them excited about what they're doing at the moment, and that type of topic before we get started, if you wouldn't mind. I mean, can you just elaborate a little bit on what you're doing now and what gets you excited in the morning, my man?
The opportunity to work with the best athletes in the world, and in particular Major League Baseball. It's one of 30 jobs in the world. I've had the opportunity to work with two different organizations at the big league level, and just kind of seeing that from start to finish. From working with guys that were first drafted either out of high school or junior college. Or a four-year university, all the way through guys that are going to the Hall of Fame or that are already in the Hall of Fame. And so I don't know if you can get more excited about coming to work to see those guys every day and just to have a small part of their development at the player development level, which I've kind of been through all that and then overseen that, and kind of on the other end where you have your Major League prospects coming through and developing those guys and kind of getting down, as they come through the system up to the major league. So you've kind of seen it from start to finish. And, looking back and being in this organization for a while, it's pretty exciting to see those guys finally make it to Toronto or whatever city, they're making their journey, man. It's awesome to kind of see that all come together.
If we're talking baseball, we're talking, generally speaking, asymmetric patterns. And I know you put together a great PDF here that you sent me a bunch of slides. And one of the ones that jumped off to me, as far as a comment or remark or a bullet point for that matter, one thing that we don't address in a lot of our sports because they're bilateral, baseball being specifically generally one-handed, whether it's the right or left side of the body. I mean, how are you trying to balance out muscles, the movement, the function, front to back, left to right, even top to bottom, if you wouldn't mind? I mean, how much emphasis are you putting on that quote unquote that injury prevention type approach before you even get started?
That's one of the number one things that we do, and you hit the nail on the head, is just identifying asymmetries in the body. We've instituted and implemented the functional movement screen, and the guys at FMS have been great to us, and we've certified all of our coaches and continuing education every year to really nail down that screen. And it is just a screen. We're not diving in to see what muscles are activating, what's not, what's turned on, what's not. That's not the purpose of the screen. The purpose of the screen is to kind of catch that big fish. So you toss out the big net, hopefully you catch the big fish, and you can identify those asymmetries that you mentioned. There's some common asymmetries across positions, and across kind of the population that we deal with, but it's nice to kind of see the differences in the right and the left side of the body to identify motor control problems. Do we need to put a little more WD-40 in the joint, or we need to put some duct tape on it to kind of stiffen it up to get that support and stability and integration that we're trying to get with all of our guys? We have a complex series of movements these guys have to go through, whether it's throwing a baseball, swinging a bat. We just want to make sure over time those bad motor patterns or programs or stiff joints just aren't continuing to grind on each other and lead to an injury. And so, we're not saying that we're identifying and preventing injury 100%. We're just trying to see what we're dealing with. We're trying to give a quick screen to every athlete that comes in our organization. We have several hundred guys that roll through here at the major league and minor league level, and so it's just a quick way to kind of tap into what these guys have going on, particularly with the functional movement screen. A perfect score is a 21, and that's not going to happen. We want to find some guys in the middle, ideally 14 all the way through, no asymmetries. But we also want to catch those guys that are, below 13 and just identify some red flags and some areas that we want to work on. We try to balance those imbalances as best we can, but at the same time, I think it's important for everybody to realize that, these asymmetries in the bodies of our athletes are what makes them the best at what they do. And so we don't want to take away that. We just want to make sure that we're not leading or heading down the road to injury and just try to balance those out from the start.
For the listeners, Chris and I are talking basically right at the beginning or maybe even the middle part of spring training here. And one of the things that when I was at spring training we worked on a lot was just the mobility and helping people with movement coming in from the off season and helping us prepare for a very long year. So if you wouldn't mind kind of having that conversation with me as far as movement goes, I mean, what are some areas of focus that you're really emphasizing as far as the mobility goes for your position players, your pitchers? I don't care what aspect of the team or what role they have, but are there certain areas of the body that you're really emphasizing as far as mobility? And then also, are there things you're doing in either a dynamic warm-up or a movement prep, agility program that's really helping aid that or support that mobility aspect of movement?
We just talked about the first thing that we do with our guys is screen them, and they get their corrective exercises. And so they have that individualized program and individualized thing, that they can do apart from our normal strength and conditioning program. So, the first thing our guys do when they come in is they grab a foam roll and start to work on that tissue. And, whether it's a foam roll, whether it's a cross ball, a stick, or whatever device that we have in here, and we got tons of those tools, and you can find them everywhere, just to kind of get some of that soft tissue restriction taken care of right away. And once that restriction is gone or reduced, then we can start to pile some movement on top of that, whether in the form of a corrective exercise or some other mobility drill that, and we have tons of them, tons of circuits, tons of, things, and we post, a circuit on the week on the board, and we have, try this, activate that, use this, and so it's, introducing, especially for the new guys to our organization here at the major league level and major league camp now, and some of these guys may or may not have seen this, and it's just become second nature to them, and that's part of their prep for the day. And then as we go outside, we incorporate some of that into our moving warm-up. Some of the mobility drills that we do in here, we kind of address that as the group as a whole, because in baseball, whether you're a pitcher or a position player or whatever, you kind of have the same thing going on. So we're really focused as a throwing athlete, as a hitting athlete, on T-spine mobility or thoracic spine. Obviously, we want our core to be very strong and stable. We want those hips to be loose, and so we're working on that hip and we're working on that glute, whether it's some soft tissue stuff or some glute activation, things like that. Calves, tons of trigger points and things like that in the calf, which are going to control the ankle, and any dorsiflexion restriction can lead to a lot of problems down the road. And so we want to try to clear up those trigger points, improve that mobility in the joint, and you guys can read on about the joint by joint approach. And that's what we do. We look above and below. We try to mobilize as much as we can, but at the same point, we try to stabilize some of the other things as well. And you got to find that delicate balance. And these guys, new to our organization, are buying in. It's really exciting. We've got a relatively, high number of new guys here at this level, and it's important to know that from the top down and through our structure of the organization, that these guys are doing it there too. So from the first day they walk in our organization, they are well aware of how important movement and mobility and stability are to what we do. And that's the first thing that we assess and the first thing they work on a daily basis.
I want to talk a little bit about the strength program, if you wouldn't mind, and baseball being a very unique sport. I played baseball and worked in baseball, and I'm sure you've been in that area for a long, long time as well. I mean, I don't know if it's the superstition or the misinformation or whatever goes on, but there's some things that go on in baseball that we even need to question at the high school level all the way through. Are there some exercises in your strength program that you either encourage or avoid? And I'm really asking from a standpoint of what has worked for you and the athletes that you get a chance to work with.
Traditionally you hear, a ton of stuff about contraindicated this, contraindicated that. I think across the board and talking to colleagues in our field and listening to some of your shows that you've already talked to, people that I've seen and worked with in the past, anything that compromises the shoulder joint, in particular the elbow for our guys, because we are throwing athletes and our guys make their living, on the mound throwing a baseball. and the other guys are hitting and swinging and worried about some other areas too. But as the overlap, shoulder and elbow, we just don't want to put these guys in a position. It's just not worth it, especially during the season. Where we're doing heavy bench press, where that compression force is coming down, or that dislocation point, at the far end. The bench press, and just putting that shoulder in a bad position, or pull-ups, or behind the neck type stuff. I mean, contraindicate the person, not the exercise, I think is a huge thing that we try to do. Some of these guys can't put a kettlebell over their head in a packed position to kind of get that shoulder pack down. For other athletes, it's important for them to do it, and we use it, and so it's find the appropriate exercise for the athlete. One thing with the screen, and especially we found out at the Dominican level and the lower levels, guys that haven't been on a program, say out of high school or junior college, is that these guys don't know how to lift. And we pick that up in the screen. And so I think we kind of had our aha moment many years ago when I came back to Toronto and was, introduced to the screen and what these guys are doing over here and the time that I had left. And it was, we had a young Dominican kid on there that went through the screen, terrible screen. The last thing we screened was a squat, and he had a 1 on the squat and couldn't do the movement with the compensation and just fell off the board. We gave him his 1 on the score, and he headed right to the squat rack, and because that was in our program at the time for that day, and we're like, wait a second, that kid has not earned his right to lift. And so we've kind of stuck by that and just kind of gone through and put our guys through progressions on, hey, you got to make sure you've earned the right to lift. You've got the pattern, we'll load it up in whatever way, and the pattern is important to us. And, we've got this extensive list of thousands of exercises we can do, and over the last couple of years, just getting with our minor league coordinators and our staff is just, hey, let's keep it simple. We talked to Dan John, we love what he's all about, and it's simple strength, it's easy strength. Let's get back to push, pull, squat, hinge, and some type of loaded carry. We don't need to get crazy. We don't need to stand on our head, spin around, do all this crazy stuff that you probably see on the internet. Let's get back to the stuff that really works and really matters. And the pattern to us is important. Depending on the player that is in front of us at that time or what progression he's going through, we're going to pick the appropriate load and the appropriate exercise for that pattern. I think it's really gone back to the basic stuff, back to the stuff that really matters, and more importantly for the guys going through our organization is let's pick some of those movements that they can be really good and proficient at before we start throwing a bunch of other stuff on top of it.
If I'm a high school baseball coach, and generally speaking at the high school level, a lot of the sport coaches are the ones that are writing up the workouts and probably calling college coaches or pro guys or minor league guys and saying, hey, can you send me the program and let me know what I should be doing with my guys? I mean, if there's some things that the high school coaches, when they reach out to you, are there considerations that are specific to that age group of athletes? What should a high school coach be considering when developing their strength conditioning program?
Yeah, and the presentation I sent you, I think hits the nail on the head, and just talking to those guys up in Toronto, the National Coaches Clinic that we had up there in January, is a lot of those coaches are dealing with the high school and amateur level up there. But the main thing in the FMS, obviously we've already talked about, but is to assess the players and specifically movement. Is let's not get too carried away with what program is in place yet or what you have in mind that you want to do. Is you got to make sure these guys have earned the right to do it in the first place, and put those guys in groups where it's beginner, intermediate, and then advanced. Whatever it is not all of those kids can be shuttled into the advanced program right now. Let's get the proper progression. Let's identify what's going on first and figure out what the heck is going on with these kids and just some basic fundamental movements. There's no secret plan or secret progression. It's, let's start from the basics. Let's assess the movement. Second of all, let's define and develop the program and the philosophy. A lot of these coaches, they just don't have a philosophy. I can't give them my program. They can buy all kinds of programs online. And then, third of that is you got to get the right equipment to implement that and the manpower to do it. So, I can give you the perfect program, but there is no perfect program. But I can give you a program, but if you don't have the equipment or the personnel to do it or the facilities or things like that, it doesn't matter what that is. And so I think it gets back to what we had talked about earlier is let's keep it simple. Guys can push, they can pull, they can squat, they can hinge, and they can carry something really heavy, no matter what kind of equipment is or where you're at, whether you're at the local park or you're at the baseball field or there's an indoor facility, whatever it is that's where the movement becomes really important. And to steal another line from Dan John is, how much do I know if it's too heavy or how do I know when to progress? It's like, look, don't ever miss a rep, and when it gets light, make it heavier. And like, well, that's just too easy. And it's like, in reality, no, it's not. Like, and we've kind of gone back to that is the way. We're not going to, do forced reps. And, when do we progress it to be heavier? It's like, well, when it becomes light, load them up. If they can do the pattern under load, there you go. That's what you've got. It's a win-win situation. And so for those coaches, I think it's important to assess movement, define their program and philosophy, and then get the equipment or the manpower to implement that program that they've come up with.
Obviously, throughout the long season, you have hot days, you have days where you're going through some tough times, generally speaking, regardless if you're having a successful season or not. And I think sometimes the importance of strength training might be put on the back shelf. And one thing that I talk to our high school players, our high school coaches about specifically is maintaining and training the legs and making sure the lower body is being taken care of. And I don't mean just pulls and wind sprints and some of the other interval type stuff we do, but actually getting in the weight room and doing some strength training. At the minor league and the big league level there, how important is training the lower body throughout the course of a very long season?
I tell you what, it's a delicate balance. Our guys, as you know, play 162 games, 180 days, and that doesn't include the games they're playing in spring training. And so that's the delicate balance. There's no, one secret recipe or formula, or, from day one I can map it out and say this is how it's going to go, or this is the day that you're going to do it. So it goes by feel, it goes by experience, it goes by, how is the guy doing that day. And so communication with each of your players, whether they're a pitcher, position player, whatever it is, or catcher, how are they feeling that day? And that's the simple conversation that you ask, and they're going to tell you. There's so many more stressors that go into, these guys' programs in their lives and things away from the field and travel and food and nutrition. Like, we can go down this road with some follow-up questions, but you just got to talk to the guys. We have turf up in Toronto. It beats our guys up a little bit. We go on grass when we're on the road, and so, guys that are playing every day, we're not lifting those legs every day. It goes back to, let's assess them when they walk in. Let's get some soft tissue going. Let's get some corrective exercises going. Let's get them feeling better. Let's get them moving around. Some guys like to lift before the game. Some guys like to lift after the game. And so it's one of those things where, at the end of the day, it comes down to volume. And so you've got to, as a strength coach, I think, pay attention to, and I tell people this all the time, we're not the only horse in the race, meaning strength and conditioning, but I want to be the heavy favorite. But at the same time, you have to understand what each other, position coach, whether it's an infield instructor or a pitching coach, what is the demand on that athlete for them that day, and what is your demand or response to that? And so especially in season, our focus has shifted to, from spring training and skill development, less strength and conditioning, to transitioning that into the season, where you've got to find that balance. Now, if it's the off season, I can crush these guys and they don't have to play the game. And so, these guys have a lot on their plate. They're playing every day. If they're a starter, if they're a bench guy, you might be able to push that bench guy a little bit more because he's got to be ready if the guy in front of him has an injury. And so you're kind of dealing with all these different types of players and situations and position specific type stuff, as well as what we do in the weight room can't affect that player, especially if he's playing in the game, and especially if he's, one of your everyday guys that he has to play every day. And so there's that delicate balance. There's no science to it, I think. It's just, monitoring your guys, understanding their workload and their volume for the particular day over the course of a week, over the course of the month. And we want those guys to be fresh, hopefully, for the playoff push down the stretch. And so it's just monitoring them, asking them how they talk, keep track of it. We're still going to train. Every day is a training day, but you're going to adjust that, whether it's, hey, we're just going to do 3 sets of 3 today, or we're going to do, 3 sets of 5, or whatever it is. You just adjust that load. The format of the workout or whatever doesn't change. We just adjust that load by the sets and the reps and intensity, things like that.
When you're talking 162 games in 180 days, many people cannot fathom the amount of stress that the body is going through from numerous situations or stimuluses and that type of scenario. A big conversation turns into the concept of recovery and the bigger picture of eating, sleeping, hydrating, and some other things that go on there. When you're on road trips is kind of the part that I want to talk about, if you wouldn't mind. Being at home, we can control some variables. We can provide some things that are comfortable. But when we go on road trips, whether it's on the bus or the plane, and get that kind of thing going, is there anything that you do to help your athletes maintain their sports performance routines when it comes to the recovery needs, the eating, the sleeping, the hydrating, the regen, and those types of things?
Yeah, and we're spoiled up here because we have pretty good facilities on the road. Obviously we'll send some recommendations with respect to what should be provided for our players. But for the most part, we have that luxury, and so we just want to educate our guys on what to eat, when to eat it. They're not going to be perfect with their diet. We can control it more at home than on the road, obviously. And especially for the minor league guys, they don't have that luxury that we have in all cases with visiting clubhouses and facilities and things like that. So I think it's a little bit tougher situation where you're getting into some of the more, fast food type restaurants or just whatever's available for that matter in that particular city. And as you know, they're smaller cities and they don't have the bigger restaurants. And so, I think it comes down to no matter what level, it's, player education and, educating our guys on what to eat, like I said, and when to eat it. We have a nutritionist that works with each one of our levels and has earned the respect of our players, and she gets it, and it's not a perfect world with respect to eating, and there's going to be some challenges. And, it's up to our strength and conditioning staff to implement that, whether it's at home or on the road, and just make sure guys have access to, choices it comes down to. And, we can't force a guy to eat a particular way, but we can educate them on the proper fuel, not only for performance, but for recovery, which is a huge aspect. And so, I think that's where we've set our focus for the last couple of years, because it is long. We get to fly on our own plane, but at the same time, the demand of travel is what it is. We're going East Coast, West Coast. We don't spend as many hours in the air as some of those teams on the West Coast. But there's still some challenges. And so, with some sleep rooms and things like that, where some other teams, including ourselves, are implementing, and just some of those, power naps and just being more aware of the sleep environment and, depending on what type of sleeper you are, when to take a nap and things like that. And we've got day after night game and many day games in a row or whatever the case may be, is just, educating our guys on the importance of nutrition. A component of that is obviously sleep, and just start that recovery process as soon as we can after the game, with whether it's a recovery shake, some soft tissue, things like that, post-game baths, whether it's, ice, things like that. So it's on our hit list as far as being, one of the priorities for our guys at each and every level.
So I'm talking to a baseball guy, and I don't bring up a question about what you're doing with starters, relievers, and even situational guys from the pitching aspect. Pretty much every pitching coach in the area who listens to this will probably send me an email and ask me why I didn't. So my question to you here is pretty straightforward. How do you approach starting pitchers versus relievers? And then, generally speaking, the situational guys are even a little different, in my opinion, more so. I mean, how do you approach those three different guys that are all considered pitchers, but they affect your team and the outcome of a game very differently? How do you go about that program, if you wouldn't mind, for each one of those individuals?
Yeah, starting pitchers are easy. Our five starters, they pitch every fifth day, and so those 4 days in between are pretty mapped out, and we've got some guidelines in place, and we're kind of playing with some different ideas, as far as what is the side day, what do we do on day one after the start, depending on how long they go on the game, when is their, upper and lower body lift, or do we do total body lifts and have more regeneration and neural excitement days leading up to the game. So we're kind of playing with that traditional 5 day. I know Dr. Coleman has already talked about it on one of your interviews, and he's being one of the godfathers, so to speak, of strength and conditioning, and somebody I've certainly picked the brain of over the last few years is, and that's kind of what we did. And baseball is rich in tradition, but I think we're, pushing the envelope on some things and trying to break through some of those barriers and just kind of experimenting, so to speak, with some different ideas on, is it side day 2, or some guys may want to push that side to day 3, which is a little bit closer to the game. And you say, well, why do you want to do that? And well, first of all, if they've had a long game and they've gone deep in the game as a starting pitcher, on their start day, those next 2 days we really want to focus on recovery. We're still training, but they're not throwing as much, and if we can slide that side back to that third day to kind of give them, a day or two to get primed up for that next start, as opposed from going, side day 2 and then 0 to 60 because they haven't thrown off the mound in 2 days. Maybe to be beneficial, and we don't know, and so we're playing around with that. I guess a non-traditional, so to speak, way. But starters are easy. Getting into the relief or middle relief, and even the closer role with respect to relief pitchers, we've just come up with some guidelines on pitch count, and if they throw a certain number of pitches in the game, if they're less than 20 pitches, we can assume that they may be throwing the next day because they didn't throw too many pitches. We may need to be available, and so we might just give them a quick workout after the game, do their shoulder exercises, and then they're on their way. And we just kind of go through a day of a short option, maybe some movement training, a short option 2, and then a day off. If you throw more than 20 pitches, then you're most likely not going to throw for 48 hours, for instance, and so we're able to throw a longer option at them. These are total bodies where we can have an upper or lower emphasis, and so we're just kind of alternating the intensities on those body parts. A long option on day 1, some movement training, short option 1, day off, short option 2. Because we have a little bit more time with those guys, and their role may change after the next time they throw, so we're constantly adjusting. Those guys that are long to middle relief, they're going obviously way more than 20 pitches, and maybe they're 2 or 3 innings, so they're almost like a starter. Well, they may not throw for another 2 or 3 days, and we've already utilized them in the bullpen, so they have some time to train. Some long option movement training, short option 1, day off, short option 2 type of situation. If you're a closer or if you're a guy that just comes in and faces one batter, you're more likely to be available for the next day and days beyond, and so that's mainly just short option work. So those are short total body sessions. We can vary the intensity with that. Whether it's 8 to 12 total sets, or if you're a longer session, we can go 12 to 15, and so some options there. I think the main thing to point out within those groups and variations is that we don't want to miss too many days in a row. If you're available tonight and you haven't pitched in 2 days, we got to get some work in. Over the course of a week or so, we keep going through, hey, you may be available the next day. Oh, you didn't throw tonight. You may be available the next day. Is we've got to get those guys some work in, and just we came up with some guidelines on how to make that happen so these guys aren't going day after day after day without getting some work in. And the workout shouldn't be, if they're lifting before the game, for instance, so taxing that they can't go out and throw in the bullpen later, because those guys do throw later in the game. If they get out of the game and they're not going to be, doing anything the next day as far as pitching off the mound because they're not available, let's go ahead and get that short workout in after the game, because now we've actually increased that recovery time as opposed if we would have waited till the next day. So just some strategies with respect to that. There's a wide range. Some guys like to break it up, upper, lower splits, and obviously we try to encourage that total body so we can get it done and allow those guys more days in between to recover. So, obviously we're throwing in that mobility component. We're throwing in that corrective exercise strategy. We're making sure the cuff is strong, things like that, and some dynamic stabilization. So that kind of runs the gamut on that. We've tried to figure that out. You just never know when these guys are going to throw, but our job is to make sure they're ready to go when they're called upon.
Generally speaking, if you're trying to get to the big league level in the strength conditioning world, you're going to start out as either a lower assistant in A-ball or extended spring, or an intern type scenario. I mean, for the guys that are starting there on your staff or staffs around the country, or even in the college or private sector, it doesn't make a difference. Those guys that are just entering our field, is there some motivational advice that you have for those guys just to help them keep plugging away to help them hopefully achieve their dream?
Yeah, I would just say, be persistent. We get emails out of the blue, or whether it's a message on LinkedIn or one of those types of websites or services, or just people that just randomly send their resumes in. Over the last few years, we've been fortunate enough to not have a lot of turnover with our staff here. We've got a great group of guys that we want to keep around, and other guys that then move on to bigger and better positions, hopefully within baseball or other things, whether they're working at a facility or open up their own for that matter. So just keep applying. Our baseball website, as far as our Strength and Conditioning Association, baseballstrength.org. A lot of us will post job openings on that site. Obviously, you can find information on NSCA's website as well with other intern opportunities. But whether it's not in baseball or you want to get in baseball eventually, is you want to try to find work or do an internship in your field. So all work experience is obviously important, but if you want to be baseball, you want to be a major league or minor league coordinator, is try to work with baseball guys. Whether it's just going to a facility and just volunteering, or hopefully you can get paid, but maybe not. You just got to put in your time. As a person that's hired, interns or other full-time people in the past, is we want to see that this is what you want to do. Eventually, if it's not what you want to do, we'll find that out, and it is what it is. But like I said, this job is tough. You're on the road all the time. You're away from your family. You don't get a lot of days off. We kind of want to make sure guys and want to know what they're getting into before they apply and things like that. But just we want to see that you're working in the field, not that you're doing something that's not baseball related but performance related. So you're working at your craft, you're educating yourself, you're reaching out to other facilities in your area. And we're not saying you have to be a baseball trainer, but a person that's got experience in sports performance, understands the aspects that we deal with our athletes from all walks of life and things like that. But just looking at that experience for one, dedication, time, experience in college, things like that. For our interns or full-time guys that we hire, the CSCS is very important. And so, we hire people that have their certified strength and conditioning specialists, and that makes sure, that from a liability standpoint, that those that are working with our athletes, have that background, have that experience, have that, knowledge to be able to work with, guys at the professional level. And so, there's tons of internships out there. Keep looking. If it's not in baseball, find it somewhere else. Like I said, if it's at a local facility, or if you have to get in the car and drive and do what you got to do, or live out of your car for, a month or two, or I don't know. But, we want people that are dedicated, that have been through, thick and thin to get there, and this is what they want to do, and that gets back to that passion that we talked about earlier. Is at some point it just doesn't matter, and this is what you want to do, and we want to hire people like that for sure.
Well, Chris, man, I know you're a busy guy, and I know there's a game going on as we're talking right now, so I'm sure you're gonna have to get up to the dugout there and try to figure out what's going on, and hopefully get one of those guys in there and help them get through spring training healthy and hopefully have a great year. If there's anybody who had any questions about anything we discussed here, do you mind? How could they go about reaching out to you and just finding out more about what you have going on and just maybe connecting with you as a professional network?
Yeah, sure. You can email me at chris.joyner@bluejays.com.
Again, Chris, man, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day. I know you're a busy guy, and again, with over a year for us getting this together, it was well worth the time, my man. Thank you very much for your time. When you're in Baltimore, obviously hook me up and or hit me up, I should say, and I would be happy to get a chance to meet with you in person and just talk shop, man. It's a great opportunity to learn with you, learn from you, and network with you, my man. Hopefully this is a launch pad for us to do more things down the road, and have a great day, big dog.
Rob, I appreciate it, man. I look forward to meeting up with you down the road, and I appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm glad we could finally make this happen.